What if everything you believed about the world wasn't the truth, but a reflection of your own heart? Jesus asked his disciples, holding a shimmering cloak that glistened with shifting colors. This cloak will reveal how your assumptions shape your reality, how they distort what you see and the way you live. The disciples leaned in, sensing they were on the verge of a profound revelation, one that would forever change the way they saw themselves and each other. It had been a long, dusty day as Jesus and his disciples walked through the towns and villages, spreading the message of hope and love. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden light over the rolling hills of Galilee. The journey had been exhausting, but the weariness they felt was outweighed by the peace that came from being close to their Master. As they climbed a quiet hill, away from the crowds and noise of the day, Jesus asked his disciples to sit and rest. The hillside was quiet, the air still. As they sat together, the disciples felt a sense of anticipation. Jesus was always teaching, always sharing, but tonight, there was something different in his manner. There was a solemnity in his gaze, as if what he was about to say would touch their hearts in ways they couldn't yet understand. Jesus stood before them, and from a small wooden chest, he pulled out a cloak. The cloak shimmered in the dimming light, shifting colors in ways that were almost magical, soft blues, deep greens, and glowing golds. It moved as if it had a life of its own. The disciples had never seen anything like it. "This cloak," Jesus said, holding it up for all to see, "is not an ordinary garment. It has the power to reveal what is hidden within each of you. When you wear it, the cloak will change colors based on the assumptions you carry. Those beliefs, fears, and judgments that shape the way you see the world and others. Assumptions are often hidden, but they control much of what we do, say, and think. Tonight, you will see the truth of your hearts." The disciples stared at the cloak, fascinated but puzzled. Peter, as always, was the first to speak. "Master, what do you mean by assumptions? How can a cloak show us what we believe?" Jesus smiled warmly at Peter. "Our assumptions are the beliefs we accept without question, Peter. They are the lenses through which we view the world. Sometimes, those lenses are clear and truthful, but more often, they are clouded by our own fears, judgments, and desires. These assumptions shape the way we see each other, ourselves, and even God. The cloak will show you what lies beneath the surface of your thoughts." The disciples exchanged uneasy glances. Each of them wondered what hidden beliefs and assumptions would be revealed. The thought of seeing their hearts laid bare, their secret fears exposed, made them feel both excited and anxious. Jesus looked at Peter and gestured for him to come forward. "Peter, you will go first." Peter hesitated. He had always seen himself as strong, a leader among the disciples, but something about this cloak unnerved him. Still, trusting Jesus, Peter stood and took the cloak. As he draped it over his shoulders, the cloak immediately began to change. The vibrant colors faded into a dull, heavy gray. Peter looked down, startled and confused. "Why gray, Lord?" Peter asked, his voice tinged with worry. Jesus' eyes softened with understanding. "Peter, your heart is burdened by fear, fear of failure, fear of others' opinions, and fear that you are not enough. That fear colors your world in shades of gray, making it seem colder, harsher than it truly is. You see challenges where there are opportunities, and threats where there is safety. Your assumptions, born out of fear, have made the world seem a darker place." Peter's heart sank. He had always prided himself on being brave, bold, and strong. But now, seeing the gray cloak, he realized how much fear had controlled him, how often he had doubted himself, feared letting Jesus down, and worried about what the others thought of him. The cloak, now heavy on his shoulders, felt like a mirror, reflecting a truth he had long avoided. Peter lowered his head. "I thought I was strong, but I've been hiding my fears." Jesus stepped closer, his hand resting on Peter's shoulder. "Strength, Peter, does not mean the absence of fear. True strength is found in acknowledging that fear, facing it, and trusting in God's love to guide you through it. Your fears do not define you, but they can cloud your vision if you let them. Look around, Peter. The world is full of light, love, and hope. Let go of the gray. Peter, with tears in his eyes, nodded. He carefully removed the cloak, feeling as though a heavy weight had been lifted from his spirit. For the first time in a long while, he felt lighter, more open. As he handed the cloak to John, his heart swelled with gratitude for Jesus' wisdom, knowing he had begun a journey of healing. John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, stood next. His heart was calm, filled with love and devotion. He had always been known for his gentleness, his compassion for others. As he draped the cloak over his shoulders, it immediately transformed into a brilliant, dazzling white. The other disciples gasped in awe at the purity and brightness of the cloak. "Master," John said softly, almost embarrassed by the attention, "why does the cloak shine so brightly?" Jesus smiled lovingly at John. "Your heart is filled with love, John. You see the goodness in others, and because of that, the world appears to you in its purest form. Your love allows you to see beauty where others see brokenness, to see light where others see darkness. The purity of your heart is reflected in the brilliance of this cloak." John's heart swelled with warmth, his eyes shining with tears. But Jesus' expression grew more serious as he continued. "Yet, even love, when it assumes too much, can blind us to truth. Your love, John, is beautiful, but you must also see the whole person. Sometimes, in your eagerness to see only the good, you miss the pain, the struggles, and the burdens others carry. Love without wisdom can blind you to the reality of their suffering." John lowered his head, understanding the depth of Jesus' words. He had always believed that love was enough to heal all wounds, but now he realized that love, while powerful, must also be wise. He had overlooked the brokenness in others, assuming that love alone could fix everything. Tears filled his eyes, not from sadness, but from the profound realization that love must also embrace truth. "I see now, Lord," John whispered. "I must love more deeply, more fully, with open eyes." Jesus nodded, his smile full of compassion. "Yes, John. Love is the greatest of all things, but it must be grounded in truth. See others fully, love them fully, and help them carry their burdens." John carefully removed the cloak, his heart filled with a new understanding. He handed it to Thomas, who had been standing quietly, his face filled with uncertainty. Thomas, known for his skepticism and need for proof, accepted the cloak reluctantly. As he placed it on his shoulders, the cloak shifted into a swirling, turbulent blue, dark and stormy, like the unsettled waves of the sea. Thomas stared at the cloak, his heart pounding. "Why this color, Lord?" he asked, his voice tense. Jesus looked at Thomas with deep understanding. "Thomas, your heart is restless. You carry doubt, not only about others, but about yourself and about God. You seek certainty, proof, and when you cannot find it, your heart becomes unsettled, anxious. You assume that if you cannot see it, it must not be true. This doubt makes your world feel unstable, as though the ground beneath you is shifting." Thomas's throat tightened. He had always struggled with doubt, needing to see and touch to believe. He had questioned Jesus' resurrection, needing to put his hands in the wounds to be sure. Now, seeing the stormy blue of the cloak, he realized how much his doubt had clouded his vision. He had lived in a world of uncertainty, always questioning, always searching for proof, never fully trusting. Jesus' voice was gentle as he continued. "Doubt is not the enemy of faith, Thomas. It is a part of the journey. But when you allow it to consume you, it clouds your ability to trust. There will always be things you cannot see, things you cannot understand. Faith asks you to trust in the love of God, even when the path is unclear." Thomas's heart felt heavy. He had wanted so badly to believe, but doubt had always crept in, stealing his peace. He had doubted Jesus, doubted himself, doubted the purpose of his life. But now, hearing Jesus' words, he realized that faith was not about having all the answers. It was about trusting, even in uncertainty. "Lord, I believe," Thomas said softly. "Help my unbelief." Jesus smiled warmly. "Your faith is stronger than you think, Thomas. Trust in what you cannot see. God's love is always there, even when the way seems unclear." Thomas removed the cloak, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. The storm in his heart was beginning to calm. He passed the cloak to Andrew, who had been waiting quietly, deep in thought. Andrew, always in the shadow of his brother Peter, had often struggled with feelings of inadequacy. As he draped the cloak over his shoulders, the fabric shifted into a sickly green, muted and dull, a color that made his heart sink. Andrew looked down, his face filled with shame. "Why this color, Lord?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Jesus looked at Andrew with compassion. "Andrew, your heart has been touched by envy. You often compare yourself to your brother Peter, and in doing so, you have allowed feelings of inadequacy to grow. You assume that you are less important, less loved, less capable because you do not stand in the spotlight as Peter does. This envy has poisoned your heart, making you feel small and unseen." Andrew's eyes filled with tears. He had always felt like the lesser brother, the one who brought Peter to Jesus but was soon forgotten in Peter's shadow. He had carried this quiet bitterness for so long, believing that his role was insignificant, that his contributions didn't matter. The sickly green of the cloak now revealed the envy he had hidden, even from himself. "But I have done nothing great," Andrew whispered. "I am not like Peter. I am not bold or strong. I have simply followed quietly." Jesus knelt beside Andrew, his eyes full of love. "Andrew, your quiet faithfulness has not gone unnoticed. You were the first to follow me. You brought others to me, including your brother Peter. Your strength lies not in boldness, but in your steady, unwavering heart. Do not compare yourself to others, for each of you has a unique role in God's plan. You are deeply loved, Andrew, just as you are." Andrew sobbed quietly, the weight of his envy and feelings of inadequacy melting away under Jesus' words. He had always longed for recognition, but now he understood that his quiet faith had its own power, its own beauty. He removed the cloak, feeling lighter, freer than he had in years. The cloak was passed from disciple to disciple, each one experiencing their own revelation. James, who had always been proud of his strength and leadership, watched as the cloak turned a deep royal purple, a reflection of his hidden pride. He had assumed that because he was strong, he was more deserving of leadership, more favored by Jesus. But now, seeing the pride reflected in the cloak, he realized how his need for recognition had clouded his love for his fellow disciples. One by one, the disciples faced their hidden assumptions. Bartholomew's quiet judgment of those who were less learned than he turned the cloak a sharp, brittle yellow, revealing his hidden arrogance. Philip, who had always struggled with feelings of doubt, watched as the cloak turned a dull, uncertain brown, his fear of not understanding the mysteries of God weighing heavily on his heart. Each disciple saw, through the cloak, the assumptions that had shaped their thoughts, actions, and relationships. Finally, after each disciple had worn the cloak and faced the truths it revealed, Jesus gathered them once again in a circle. The night had fully fallen, and the stars sparkled brightly in the sky above them, as if the heavens were celebrating the revelations of the evening. The disciples sat in silence, their hearts full of emotion, each of them feeling changed by what they had learned. Jesus took the cloak into his hands once more. The fabric, now resting softly in his palms, shimmered gently, the colors shifting between soft hues of blue, green, and gold. His eyes were full of compassion as he looked around at his beloved friends, who had walked this difficult but necessary journey of self-reflection. "My dear friends," Jesus said, his voice filled with warmth, "do you see now how our assumptions, our fears, doubts, and judgments, can cloud the truth? When we assume, we often fail to see the person standing before us for who they truly are. Instead, we see only the reflection of our own hearts, our own fears, our own desires, our own insecurities. The world is filled with many colors, many truths, yet we can only see them clearly when we lay aside the filters of our assumptions. Tears filled the eyes of many of the disciples as they listened to Jesus' words. Each of them felt the weight of what they had learned that night, the deep truths about themselves that had been uncovered. Jesus continued, his tone gentle but filled with wisdom. To truly see, you must approach one another with open hearts, free of assumptions. Only then can you love as our Father in heaven loves, without conditions, without judgment, and with the purest of intentions. Just as this cloak changed colors, so too can your hearts. Be mindful of what you carry within, for it will shape the way you see the world and one another. The disciples sat in peaceful silence, the weight of the lesson settling deep within their souls. Above them, the sky had transformed into a canvas of stars, twinkling softly as if the heavens themselves were rejoicing in the truth that had been revealed. Each disciple felt the gentle touch of Jesus' wisdom, as if he had reached deep into their hearts and lifted a veil, allowing them to see the world and one another with new eyes. In that moment, sitting under the vast, star-filled sky, they knew they had been forever changed. They were not just followers of a great teacher, they were beloved children of God, guided by a love deeper than any assumption could ever reach. And as they rose to leave the hillside, walking side by side, they did so with eyes that saw not just the world, but the truth beyond it, a truth that would forever change their hearts. In the days and years to come, the disciples would often recall that night, the cloak, the shifting colors, and the wisdom of their master. Every time they felt the stirrings of doubt, judgment, or fear, they would remember the lesson of the cloak. They would remind themselves to see with hearts open and free from assumptions, knowing that only then could they walk in the light of love, seeing the world and one another with clarity, compassion, and grace. This is end of the story. Comment Amen if you believe in Jesus' blessings. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.